ahead and discuss that now.
I had no comments.
Okay,
I didn't see anything.
all right, thank you very much. So I'll ask for now for a motion to those members who were present for that meeting to approve those minutes for January 27th.
I'll make the motion.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. Moving on to today's NBAR members informational briefings, we have just so you know, we have a couple of, well, one new member and one second time. Is your second time here? Perfect.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
All right, so we have Tom Lopez and Michael
Nicole.
Nicholas. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And welcome, everybody. It's good to see faces instead of not seeing mine because I didn't use my camera during the video stuff.
Thank you.
And you know why. All right, with that done, we will move on to the first agenda item. And that is 21 VAR 00254. Commercial building in Los Alamos. If the team is present, go ahead and introduce yourselves for the record and we will begin your presentation.
Point of clarification, Mr. Chair.
Sir.
Under public comments, it has Michael Nicola. Is that you?
So
Are we not refusing from this thing?
I think we skipped over to that last time.
We did? Okay, well, we're gonna step back for a second then. Sorry. We'll move on now to staff update.
All right, thank you, Chair. I just have a couple updates from planning and development regarding a recent ordinance that was adopted by the Board of Supervisors. I think some of you have heard about this already, but essentially the Los Alamos and the area immediately surrounding it has been moved into NBAR jurisdiction, and technically that goes into effect in mid-April. So there is a Los Alamos area project on this agenda, but it's for conceptual only. So because the board isn't actually taking an action on it, that's why it can be before you today. If it was up for preliminary, we couldn't take an action because technically NBAR doesn't have jurisdiction yet. So just wanted to provide some context on why you could see it and when the ordinance went into effect. I don't think I have any further.
So it goes to the planning commission next?
It went to the planning commission. You know what? I'm not sure. It didn't go to the planning commission. It was initiated by the Board of Supervisors, not planning and development. So the 4th district took it directly to the board, and they had the first reading in February and the second reading March 14th. So it didn't, planning staff wasn't involved. It didn't go to the planning commission. It was just done at the board level.
That's a bit unusual.
I haven't seen it before, but maybe on district boundaries, it's not unusual. David, do you have any to add?
I'm sorry, so can you, I had a hard time hearing, can you use your mic when you ask the question?
I was just asking, isn't that a bit of an unusual procedure to go directly to the Board of Supervisors and circumvent the planning commission?
I think lots of ordinance amendments go directly to the board. I think when it involves land use, they often go to the planning commission, but this one was initiated by the 4th district supervisor. So I think given the circumstances, that's just not the way they chose to go. Yeah.
Okay, no, thank you.
And perhaps too, it's because all of the boards that they appoint members to, like that, maybe there's no requirement to go to the planning commission because they're appointed boards.
How will we be handling projects that are at preliminary and final?
Yeah, we'll be taking it here before you with the
So
same
we'll pick it up where
status.
they left off.
Yeah. Yeah, there isn't any provisions in the ordinance on how to handle those projects that are midstream. So I think the best we can do is just to be fair to the project, have it come before you at the same level, with the prior comments and, context and advisory to you, but you'd be taking the action based on your
So the
decision.
projects today from Los Alamos are going to go to the planning commission next.
Say that one more time.
The projects in Los Alamos today, are where they're conceptual, are they going to the planning commission next?
The Shawkran project. It doesn't require planning commission approval. They got the map approved by the planning commission, I believe, but and we can talk about it more when it's up, but these are just land use permits for the commercial and residential uses that are proposed, and they don't trigger any discretionary permits that require them to go before the planning commission at this stage.
Okay, just to back up on that, I'd like to have those items that are midstream coming from Los Alamos. If we can get those items to the board at least a couple weeks before they're agendized. That way we can take a look at them, digest kind of what the CBAR was doing, and then be ready for them when they arrive.
Okay, I will do that.
Okay, thank you. All right, with that said, just Stephen made a comment with regards to Michael as a public commenter on the items listed in front of us for these two agendas. I think both David and I think Michael already talked to county council.
Okay.
With regards to his participation, and county, when I spoke to him, he kind of like left it up to me, and then I knew he was gonna talk to you, and then, I had no problem with it because the nature of your comments.
Right.
And then I believe county council just left it up to you. Is that correct?
So, of course, attorney-client information is going to be between attorney and client, and I believe Michael was waiting to hear back. I reached out to counsel on this issue, and I hadn't heard back, so I'm not sure if he's just not in today. So I think with that, we would just fall back on, I think what you just stated, that we would leave it up to you to decide.
Yeah, just so you know, I had no issue with it based on the videotape and all that stuff that I watched.
I mean, I don't have any problem either way. I'm just wanting to be helpful.
Okay.
My comments were fairly innocuous.
Right.
Mostly community oriented, not critical of the project. Do I need to?
Mr. Chair, and just as a reminder, I know that we're all kind of getting used to the being in person again, but if, just a reminder, just for the record and for the hearing, if you could just make sure to use your mic when you're speaking. Thank you.
As I was saying, can you hear me? Can you hear me now? My comments at public hearing before were rather innocuous, that we're not critical of the project, mostly about neighborhood context. I think you said that you heard that. With that in mind, I'm really happy to go either way, but I think I can actually be helpful.
I think so too.
Okay, I live in Los Alamos, so.
Yeah, I mean, everything I saw was exactly that. So,
Then I'll stay.
okay.
Thank you.
All right, so with that said, we'll move on to standard item number 1. CAR 21-00254, is the team available? And are they ready to begin? their
Yes, I'm present. This is Tony Cano.
Okay, great. Go ahead and introduce your team and begin your presentation.
Sure. First of all, the owner for this project is Babak Shakrian. He's owned this property for some time and has admired Los Alamos for a number of years. I was fortunate enough to be brought onto the project. I've done a number of projects in Los Alamos, more of a historic preservation type approach with the old gas station next to the Union Hotel. Bob's Wellbred, which was also an old gas station there in town. And then a third project years ago, which is the current location of the bodega. So I feel like I've contributed quite a bit of historic preservation and a new twist on some old structures that are just completely charming there in Los Alamos. So with that, this is the first of a ground up construction project that we've considered. And Bobak was kind enough to bring me on board. So with that being said, the commercial project here on Bell Street, as you well know, the owner could have kept this as one contiguous property or project, but somehow or another was led to believe that he needed to split it. So Mr. Chakran has both the Bell Street project here as well as the Wade Street project behind, which you'll hear after this presentation. So I've always been somewhat of a historic preservationist, and gosh, what better town to land in than Los Alamos. My wife and I moved up from San Diego back in 2003 and immediately started talking with a number of landowners there about potential projects. We had opened up a home and garden shop at the Bodega, which is a really charming property with stone walls and so forth. So I understand the sensitivity to town and really enjoyed contributing to it over the years. So this is our latest project here, and as you can see, it's in the conceptual phase. And talking with our planner, Adam Orta, it kind of came to to make better sense if we kept the ground floor commercial, and actually would like to propose 2 residential units upstairs, staying within the same building envelope that's been designed. So please can keep that in mind, that it seemed to make sense to have a residential component on the second floor rather than repeating the commercial on the first floor. So with that being said, we've got roughly 2,500 square feet of lease space there, as well as the entryway, which must accommodate ADA accessibility. So at this point, just keep in mind, because it's conceptual, that we'd like to think of this as a residential on the second floor. Working with a number of local design professionals, Don Donaldson has done our civil engineering. Because it is a flood sensitive area and has a special overlay, we've considered that in this design as well as the Wade Street project. We'd like to extend the sidewalks and so forth there along the highway state route, planting trees out front. We're working with Bethany Clough, a local landscape architect, as well on both projects. So we see the improvements just continuing down as much as possible. I think the board just recently approved the Meyer project just to the east of us as well. Much bigger project, which is going to turn out fabulous. Got a real historic component as well. So we can flip to the next page, please. So this is the subdivision done by Don Donaldson of a contiguous parcel that was split, I guess we're going on 5 years ago now. But to maintain a commercial component on parcel A, and parcel B would be all residential units. Okay, moving on. So this just subdivision documents taking at one time, which was 1 parcel from Bell Street to Wade Street, is now 2 parcels. So as you well know, there's a sensitive flood component. I don't know if there's been any issues with all the rain we've had this season, but nonetheless, this is part of a FEMA map area where the particular lots have to be elevated if they're within that flood zone, making Los Alamos a special problems area. So we've accommodated that by essentially raising the entire building pad on the magnitude of 24 inches. So with that, there's a ramp component and on-site drainage. If you would please zoom in, you can see the hatching at the back of the proposed building. That's intended to be permeable pavers to allow for groundwater to dissipate through the site. And then any overflow would run in that channel to the far left of this drawing or the west of the parcel. We were also asked to provide a 3-foot wide Verizon for a communications easement there. So if anyone's wondering why we didn't go to the property line, we've been asked for an easement along that property line there to the west. Okay, next, please. This is our proposed floor plan. Again, we have access through a special easement from the Waite Street side. So who's ever controlling the cursor, if you could just wave down into the lower right-hand corner of this particular drawing. There'll be access granted via an easement from the Waite Street side. So there's no vehicle access from Bell Street here on this particular drawing. So we see it much like an old livery, if you will. I've been involved with some historic restoration. The old gas station next to the Union was a great project, it's turned out wonderful over the years, as well as Bob's Wellbread, which was also an old service station / grocery store / hospitality hub. That goes back quite a number of years. So trying to look at this as a new project, but give it a nice spin to make it look more historic with rustic wood siding, probably some old metal roofing, and just get it to fit into the current atmosphere of Los Alamos. Okay, next slide, please. Now there's an old reference. I said next slide. Get that? So it's upstairs floor area, much like the lower level. In talking with the owner, we feel like we'd like to introduce this more as a mixed use with 2 residential living units upstairs. So therefore, those 2 restrooms there would not be necessary. So I think what you'll see the next time around is that we'd have 2 apartment units upstairs with access off of the Waite Street side. Next. You see that either old corrugated metal roofing or possibly standing seam, just to give it that old ambiance of an older building. So those details there kind of reflect what we anticipate some of the roof lines and so forth would be. Next slide, please. Here's our proposed elevations. The front elevation would be the south elevation, which is actually along Bell Street. Yes, thank you. So we see large windows, much like you would see in an 1800s building where there's minimal divided lights. That would be the grids and so forth. Like to have some roll-up doors just to make this more inviting during the seasonal times. So both of those lower level large units would be roll-up type doors. Upstairs now with changing more towards a residential feel, that'd be nice for a nice upstairs balcony there. We see rustic wood siding, old station lanterns and so forth for the lighting elements. And then we can slide to one of the other elevations just for an overview. So wood siding, the repeat of a old fenestration motif that would continue on. This particular elevation would be facing Bob's Wellbread, if you're all familiar with that. Then sliding down to the next elevations. The one there on the left would be the rear elevation. And with the idea of going to residential apartments upstairs or living units, I think it's going to be fabulous for views in each direction as well off of these proposed balconies. This elevation here would be facing the recently approved Myers project. I think they've got a structure directly adjacent to this, which has more of an agrarian feel to it, maybe even an old barn, if you will. So a lot of those old elements, I can see some anodized metal lanterns there, as you see, open grid railings, and just give it sort of a rustic feel as much as possible. We probably have a wainscot at the bottom there. Whoever's controlling the cursor could run horizontally at the bottom of the building. I'd like to give it a feel as though that's, yeah, that wainscot there would be sort of a concrete feel to it. Just make the building look rustic as much as possible once we move in, rustic wood siding and metal roofing. Okay, next. These are just a sense of some of the sections and the idea that we do have to build up. If we could zoom into the yeah, right there where your cursor is, I can give you a feel for what we're having to do in terms of site drainage. as you all well know, the sensitivity to flood is a high potential. So we have a drainage channel there to the far right-hand corner of that drawing, just to give you a sense of what's needed to dissipate any potential for flood. Yeah, very good. Also, too, this is an easement that was required by Frontier or Verizon, so that they could have a communications easement there. We can expand to the other drawings. This just gives you a general sense of the bulk or the scale of the building. Next slide. Again, more of the same, just give you a sense, and we do have a height restriction, which will be well under, I think we're 3 feet under the height restriction. Next drawing. Just give you just a general sense. I just was cautious about adding too much color. I think it's more about the form of the building and how it fits into the current surroundings. Next. This is our landscape plan. So, we'd love to be able to carry as much of the green foliage as much as possible. And I think it helps to create a building, a little extra separation from Bob's Wellbred, which would be to the west of this, or at the bottom of the screen. So it gives us an opportunity to create a bit of a landscape barrier and some greenery along there with annual color. And then, of course, we'd continue the street trees to the left there. Okay, I think that may be it. I'm ready for any questions. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Mr. Chair, just to point out, just in case the members didn't know, so we also do have a planner memo for this item. And I believe the planner is available as well for questions.
Okay, thank you. Why don't we go ahead and get the planner memo for this?
It's on screen now.
Where's the water tower?
Yeah.
This project goes back well over a year ago. We first presented to the community literally over a year ago, January of 2022. At that point, we made some concessions. There was also a water tower that's being proposed for the Meyer project directly adjacent. So we felt like, rather than creating that redundancy, it would be best to remove the water tower.
So its water tower was lovely.
Now, you say, it says it's a black and white color scheme? Is that still?
That's not true. What the unfortunate thing, both projects were reviewed at the same time at the other BAR. So I think there was some confusion. A lot of those comments from one project to the other, Bell Street versus Wade Street, were combined. So the Wade Street has got a different character. What I'm proposing is more of a rustic vertical wood siding that would be reminiscent of a barn that was actually on this property back in the late 1800s, 1900s.
And what material would that be? I mean, are you going to paint it or are you going to leave it natural?
Well, there are actually lumber suppliers that provide materials that have a rustic nature to them. They're cured, so you're not going to have a lot of splintering and so forth. So the direction right now would be use real wood weathered siding, such that it doesn't split, crack, and become unsightly. So that's the intention at this point.
So I see on the plans are 1x8 vertical.
That's quite possible. There's cured material that you can buy with 1x8, making it less expensive as long as you have the proper underlayment. So that would probably be our direction, is to go in that and use weathered material.
Can you tell me what a nickel cap is
Were you seeing that? I'm sorry.
on the elevations?
A nickel cap.
It's mentioned several times. I just didn't know what it was.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. In what regard, I don't
Look at
recall.
the south elevation, which I think is actually the north elevation. Number 2. See where it says 1x8 siding with nickel cap. On the sec-
I honestly don't know what that is. It must be a misnomer that I missed,
Okay,
a mislabeling. Yeah, nickel.
and just so I know which way it is, that's the north elevation, right?
Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? That should say nickel gap. So I see, just to pronounce the siding, the vertical siding, we'd have a nickel gap. So that's just a way of gauging the space in between each individual board.
Oh, thanks. And
Yeah,
how do you waterproof that?
you can get it pre-finished, and we'd be watering proof it from behind, because with the use of real wood siding, we would have to probably adhere a piece of fireproof gypboard behind that wood siding, as required by the fire department for high fire zones. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I've done that before and it's turned to mush after about 10 years. But so you've got all your trim is hardy. And what about that band around the middle?
That would
Between
be-
the second
Yeah,
floor.
that would be a matching wood siding, a weathered material. We'd have to cup it in the back so it doesn't begin to cup and split and crack. So there's a number of approaches we could take with that.
Because on one of these pages, I saw that you had a hardy material as the band, which didn't seem right.
Well, it probably depends a lot on what the eventual budget will be. Thankfully, construction costs have come down a bit, but they're concerned. So that might have been just an option at one time to help reduce the cost.
So you're 12 inches from the property line on the left. Do you have any fire issues with the decks and so forth?
Well, we'd be using heavy timber. I've done a number of houses out in San Ynez or large areas that have a more severe fire danger. So, there are different ways that we can use glass impregnated lumber if need be. There's ways to treat the lumber so that it withstands the fire resistant natures.
Okay, so how big are those posts? Those are big?
Yeah, I believe we've got 6x6, even 8x8s. I was concerned because they are tall. I wouldn't want them to look too spindly, if you will. So
8x8s are nice.
Yes, I agree.
The window in the front, on the right, on the bottom, does the window goes all the way down to the floor, and then tell me what's going on there.
Yeah, so it would be a retractable overhead roll-up door that opens up that environment there from the interior out to the street. So in the summertime, there's great tourism and so forth. I just thought it would be nice to have that open up and be able to enjoy the times where the weather is just incredible. So there's some flexibility to raise that door, much like a garage roll-up door, if you see it that way.
Okay, and there's plaster around the bottom. Is that a recommended material in the guidelines?
No.
I'm just trying to familiarize myself with that.
No, it's a choice. I just thought it'd be nice to break up some of the verticality by introducing a nice horizontal banding. So this would probably be a smooth plaster, as I mentioned there.
Well, I like the base band, but I was just worried about the material. The plaster, is the plaster?
I don't understand. What's your worry? You said you have a worry. What do you mean?
In the guidelines for Los Alamos, they have recommended materials and so forth. I'm just trying to familiarize myself with that. Is it a recommended material in the guidelines for Los Alamos? Plaster.
Quite frankly, I'm not that familiar with that requirement. I just, as far as the design element and the aesthetic, I think it would be great if this looked like old weathered concrete, and we can do that with a use of smooth plaster with some color variation to it. rather than using a, a concrete base. Los Alamos being one of the early towns there established in the 1860s, I think it was, you'd find an old barn like this. And I just think it'd be a great use of the material to make it look more like old concrete, if you will.
I don't have a problem with it. I'm just trying to wrap my head around what materials they want to use. And the gable up above is kind of empty. Is that where you intend to put a sign?
Yeah, so there would certainly be signage right there in the gable, introducing this in some way. Just haven't made full circle with signage quite yet.
Okay, probably it being devoid of any kind of articulation of any sort, it could be a good place to put the sign.
I agree. I absolutely agree with that.
Okay, the gable around the side on the right side, it's pretty, there's no ventilation or any kind of articulation of any sort. Are you planning on looking at that?
If we could go to that elevation, please,
Yeah.
that'd be great.
That's that upper left. Yeah, that guy.
Yeah, I think some additional articulation there could be great. Even a repeat of that window that's currently centered on the gable at the second level. Maybe we replicate that, bring a copy of that same window there into the further up into the gable.
That would be nice. And you've also got the eaves almost in the same plane. Are you going to bring one of the gables forward or backwards to get the fascias? Sometimes there's a problem where they butt together like that. Yeah, think about that anyway.
Yeah,
and this is the one that faces the bakery, right?
it is correct. Bob's Well Bread. Yeah, that was also a project that I designed. So, my thing is with Los Alamos, it's so charming that we try to pick up as much of the historic detail as possible. And when you get into a single line drawing like this, it looks so clean and crisp, but I think it's important to create some rustic nature to some of these elements. So, in general, these are some of the directions we've talked about with the owners.
And just as a practical matter, there's some of the boards on the second floor towards the gable peak are quite long. Are you able to get boards that long, or are you going to have to break them?
Yeah, I imagine we'd probably have to put a horizontal banding, probably where that dashed line is. Yes, So there'd
Okay,
be,
show us what that looks like next time.
Excuse me?
Show us what that looks like next time.
Okay.
How you want to handle it.
Yeah, great comment. I thank you for that. So, there'd be a repeat of the window there further up in the gable, and there might even be some extra articulation underneath the overhang there at the 5 and 12 pitch.
The other thing is, I've not seen anywhere on here what the overall height of the building is.
So let's go to one of the sections. I believe I noted it there.
There were elevations above sea level, but I don't want to do the math.
There are some previous sections too. Forgive me, I don't recall whether I actually put that on there.
And what's the maximum height?
35 feet is the maximum.
Is it 35 or 25?
35 is my understanding from existing grade. So keep in mind, we're having to build these lots up with a retention about 24 inches above existing grade. So that kind of impacts the overall height as well.
Yeah, I saw two different heights when I was skimming through the guidelines. I don't remember which one would apply.
It's my understanding that 35, I believe Adam is present too. He may be able to interject, our planner.
Hey there. I believe it's, let me double check right now. I believe you guys are correct.
Which is what?
Sorry, 35. Give me 1 second.
Any other questions we can answer while he's helping out with that?
What do you think the peak height is on your building to your ridge?
I'm sorry.
What is the height of your building?
I could have sworn it was on here. I thought we were at 31 feet.
Are they 10-foot, they're 10-foot floors?
At one time, we were at, yeah, I don't think the height would be there. It would be on those elevations.
So you're about 22 to the top plate, the second floor top plate?
You know, I'm sorry, I just can't answer directly. I thought we were more like 30 feet to the highest ridge there. In fact, the elevation that you were questioning, the east elevation.
Yeah, you just go to the top, the highest.
Yes,
elevation.
correct.
Make sure you show that next time.
Okay. I'm not sure who's asking me questions.
Hey there, sorry, this is Adam. Yes, it's correct. The maximum height would be 35 feet
Thank you.
from existing grade, correct?
Right. Mhm. Any other questions I can help with?
This is Steve Reese. I have a couple questions. Jim covered several of them, but I'm a little bit unclear at this point what the distance of the building is from the property lines on the sides.
I think it's 1 foot and 5 feet.
Yeah, so I've got it. Yeah, you can zoom in a bit more too. On the east side of the building, it was 1 foot. We'd wanted to maintain in the event we needed to get any drainage out that direction, but this here, the engineers determined that we've got to have this retention on the back of the property. So at this point, we've got a 5 foot side setback on the west side there. You can zoom in, see where 96.9, yeah, right there. So we plan to have a drainage swale for overflow.
Okay, well, I get that. Where I was going with this is the 1 foot side.
Right.
I think you need to check your building code a little bit more closely here because I don't think you're allowed to have many fenestrations within 1 foot of the property.
Well, you're right, and that's why I have that indention there. I brought the building face inside. And so we can have false windows as long as they're treated per the fire code. So there.
And as you convert this over to residential on the second floor, your fenestration is going to definitely be changing.
Yeah, and that's.
I think that's going to be an important aspect of how this thing looks going forward when you start to put bedrooms and living rooms and what have you on that second floor.
Yeah, and so you'll see that on this design as well as once we get to the Waite Street project where fenestration facing towards the property line can be pulled back or recessed further to meet the code.
Well, three foot, I believe 3 foot is the minimum, and then you're dealing with a percentage of the
Yes,
wall.
we'll be working with the building department, and part of that submittal will reflect what code requires.
I understand, but if we're reviewing this and you're showing windows, then the windows that may or may not be there in the future, then it's not a realistic presentation of what potentially could be the facade of the building.
Okay.
And my second point is, or second question is, and Jim touched on this, in those high gables, perhaps you want to look at some attic ventilation, maybe could be placed up in there. I don't see where you've really dealt with ventilation yet, but again, that distance to the property line could be an issue for your attic ventilation. And the third point would be the mechanical equipment, where you're planning to place that if it's residential on the second floor, and how would you plan to get mechanical equipment to down to the first floor? Or maybe you've already thought that out. I just don't see that on here, but
Yeah, being that it's conceptual view, haven't quite gotten there, but I think there's some great options for us. You know, with the movement towards heat pump and equipment like that, it's going to be a challenge. So we'll end up hiring a mechanical engineer that'll guide us through the process.
okay. Well, those are pretty much my points, and along with the ones that Jim touched on about the height of the siding there on that gable end, definitely it's not gonna That looks like it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 feet, and I don't think you're gonna find lumber that long, so you're gonna have to probably split that with some flashing and trim. But as Jim said, I'd like to see that also on your next submittal.
Okay,
Along with a floor plan of how you plan to prepare the second floor for residential and how that would affect the fenestration.
okay, yep, fair enough.
That, I have no other comments.
This is Jim again. I have a couple of other things that just popped into my mind. You've got the a residential project behind. What's the physical distance between the buildings? I couldn't find it on the plans anywhere easily. Is it, they don't touch, do they? Are they close?
No, they do not. So if we could go to the site plan on this particular project, we've got that drainage membrane or the need for retaining the drainage. Yeah, this drawing here is great. We could zoom in. So on the rear of this Bell Street facing property, I believe it's a 20-foot area at the rear for retention. It's an underground basin with permeable pavers. We have the same requirement on the Wade Street side, as you'll shortly see. So there's parking for the residential side on the Wade Street there. So just if we were to zoom in on that hatching towards the bottom of the sheet, I believe there's a repetitive note. So this is our on-site retention, which will allow for site water to be directed here, permeate through the soil, and then overflow will run out through that overflow channel there to the left that we looked at earlier.
So are they 40 feet apart?
Minimum, yeah. So once we get to the Wade Street site, you'll see that there's some parking in addition to this underground basin on the Wade Street side. So it's a greater distance. I'm going to say it's probably on the magnitude about 30 feet, actually.
What I'd like to see next time is a site plan showing both of them and an elevation showing both of them. Not necessarily for working drawings, but for continuity, at least on the side elevations.
Well, you do understand that they're two separate submittals, correct?
I'm going to review them though as they're, yes, I do.
Okay.
So this will, so you can use them for both. It's a 2-for-1.
The other thing, Tony, would be because I understand the aesthetics here, to look very rural in character and older in styling. But you might want to consider where you're going to put your solar panels on that roof. It's now a mandatory feature for residential, as you probably know.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That's going to be kind of an important on that roof plane. So you might give that some consideration.
Does the board have jurisdiction over where I locate a solar or PV panels,
Yes,
even though it's required by a state mandate?
if we can see it, it's visual.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
Also, I'd like the planner to elaborate on the project to the east, the Myers project. I don't know what's going on there.
Hi, this is Adam. I'm actually not too familiar with the Meyer project. I believe Shannon Reese is more familiar with that project, and she can probably give a quick overview as to the project scope.
Thanks, Adam. Tina Mitchell's the design planner on it, but I do have some familiarity with what's proposed. They recently changed from a land use permit to a development plan because they increased the development square footage on site. So that development plan is in progress. And what we could do the next time this comes is give you the conceptual site plan and elevations so you have more neighborhood context.
That'd be great.
Okay, Michael, you have some comments?
Actually, a couple quick questions. One is on the west side between this project and Bob's Wellbred. I know that there are, shall I say, at least one ancient oak tree on that property, which I think kind of spreads out. And I'm just wondering what the treatment is going to be of that, whether that tree is going to be lost, or whether it will be able to stay there?
Yeah, great
Different.
question. If we go back to the site plan, I believe it's delineated on my, on the site plan, especially from, yeah, the engineering point of view. So there it is, there to the lower left-hand corner. So we pulled the building back to allow for the foliage. Yeah, you can see it looks like bullet holes. That's a multi-trunk. Yeah, right there. Uh-huh. So that you can see where there's a number of circles there that represents a multi-trunk for that old oak tree that's there. And it does spill over onto this project site. So you see where the section BB is with 2 up arrows. That's yeah, you can see the scroll line that represents the drip line of the tree.
So I guess my question is the tree going to be affected?
No,
And even though it looks like it creeps over to the other property?
oh, it definitely creeps over, but we're going to be diligent to preserve that tree. I mean, it's fabulous. We want to build to it, not eliminate it. I mean, it's gorgeous.
Yeah. My other question is probably to staff, Adam. Now that Tony, you had mentioned that you're looking at shifting the emphasis of the second floor in the front building to residential, does that change the parking requirements, the on-site parking requirements, which I think were somewhat limited before? I do know that you have a delivery parking area in between the 2 buildings. I believe I heard that at the CBAR meeting recently. But I'm just questioning now that that has changed. Is there going to be an increase in parking requirement? Thank you.
Michael, was that a question for Adam or for myself?
I think it's probably for both.
Yeah. So we I see Adam's, are you coming on, Adam?
No, go for it, Tony.
So what we want to do, we're allowed to have 2 residential units upstairs that do not require on-site parking. Once you exceed the limit of 2, then parking is required. So in the CMLA, it allows for street parking for those units. Yes, we do have an easement from the Waite Street side. And so therefore, we'd have our required parking for our Waite Street project. And we are not required to have on-site parking for just 2 residential units.
Yeah, just to reiterate what Tony said, CMLA is kind of a unique zone district that we have here with its own unique set of development standards, and the parking requirements, well, specifically, Tony would be required to install a loading commercial loading space if it was exceeding 3,000 square feet. But for the residential parking requirements, Tony's right. 2 or less residential units wouldn't require on-site parking. However, they would still need to show as part of the project and on the plans that they have access to off-street parking within 200 feet of the property lines, if I'm not mistaken. So while they still don't have to show on-site parking that required it technically, parking's still taken into consideration for those 2 units.
Does that
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, does that answer the question, Michael?
It answers it, but it doesn't change my concern about it, given the project immediately next door has also got a significant residential component in the back of their project. And that Waite Street immediately behind both of these buildings, or all 3 of these buildings, is taken over by employee parking almost every day. That's just a comment.
Kevin, a quick question. If there's underground infiltration for rain, stormwater in that root zone of that tree, is that a problem?
I'm sure Shannon's gonna make sure they do a tree protection plan in there.
Well, I meant long-term with the, in that root zone.
If there's a lot of water there, it could,
Kill the tree.
It may, it depends on the disturbance of the roots, and that's something that would only show up over a long period of time. It wouldn't be immediate.
Is it possible to either condition it or to modify the underground retention so that it's outside of that root zone?
Even being outside of the root zone, the percolation is just gonna move through the soil profile laterally. It'll move horizontally. Yeah, I would be a little bit concerned about it.
So I guess
Yeah,
the thing is to hire a licensed arborist, right, to give us input on that?
You will most likely be required to do that, yes.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Just a question.
Bethany probably is, isn't she?
No,
Excuse me?
She's not?
No, Bethany is not. If I may, Mr. Chair. I reviewed the landscape plans, had only one small concern. Tony, what kind of fencing are you proposing on the west side?
I don't see.
You know
any-
yet?
I don't see that we'd be proposing any fencing.
That, if you go back to that page we were on,
Uh-huh.
that's what I thought I was looking at.
Yeah, let's take a look and see. Oh, yeah, I hadn't addressed this with a civil engineer, Don Donaldson, so, that was something that I'm sure he found an appropriate drawing. We may have talked about it briefly, but I think it'd be better if we didn't have a fence there, quite frankly.
Okay, then that makes my concern a little more important. I'm not sure exactly what is on the west side of that property line,
Uh-huh.
but the plant that Bethany's proposed has thorns on it. So being especially close to the sidewalk, I'd be concerned about that. Just recommend that it be pulled back away from it.
Uh-huh.
That plant has long pendulous branches that could reach out and extend, unless somebody's constantly maintaining it, it could be an issue there.
Yeah.
So,
And I know that Bethany's present for this presentation, so your comments are welcomed for sure.
okay. And then I had a question for staff.
Kevin, can I ask you a quick question about what the name of that plant was?
Pyracantha. Fire thorns,
Okay.
if that's easier for you.
All right, thank you.
This is for staff. The currently shows offices upstairs, but Tony's mentioned they want to change that to residential. Are they required to pick one option only? Or can they, as the project develops, the market changes, do they have the option of going back and forth?
Are you, just for clarification, so since if they're proposing residential units, are you asking if they wanted to, on a later date after the project's been approved, to convert them to commercial units? Is that your question?
Yeah, I'm only asking for them. Do they have the option? Because I think that would be a good thing for them. I'm just trying to understand what is the long-term implication of changing it from one to the other.
I think anything's possible when it comes to converting them. That it's definitely a possibility. We would I have to look to see what sort of permit path we would do to essentially change the use of those. And if we're changing the use to add more commercial space, or if we're reducing residential units, that might change other development requirements for the property. I don't see how parking would change from converting residential units to commercial spaces, since here in CMLA, on-site parking is not a requirement. I can't think of anything at the top of my head. Perhaps Shannon, can you foresee any sort of development requirements that might happen from that conversion?
Yeah, I think the only real concern, because the setbacks, things like that wouldn't change. There's no parking requirements for commercial uses. So that those aren't things that are changing, but one of the things that the applicant has, one of the reasons they're making the change to residential on the second floor is because they don't want to accommodate a loading space on the site because of the driveway height that would be required on the residential side of the project that you're going to see next. So, they wouldn't have the height clearance for that. And that's one of the reasons they're changing to residential up top here. So that would be a major consideration if they wanted to do a change of use LUP in the future, how to accommodate that loading space.
Thank you.
And typically, Kevin, it's a lot easier to convert commercial to residential than residential to commercial because of fire and occupancy requirements.
I just thought it might be to their advantage if there was some way in reviewing it now, they could keep that option, but I understand the implications.
Yeah, we've just found that there's, very strong site restrictions based on one versus the other. And I believe really it's best to stick with a CMLA mixed use with a commercial down, residential up. I think it'd be fabulous, especially with some of the views that are there and the need for additional housing.
Do any of the board members have any comments, any other comments at this time?
Mr. Chairman, I do. Tony, this is Tom Lopez.
Hey there, Tom.
Yeah, I was wondering, your section B, that's shown on the residential side as well as the commercial side, on that same page, I'm sorry. If you zoom in, the one we were just looking at where Kevin was talking about the fence right there. So that fence is about 9 foot high on the adjacent property. One of the comments from CBAR asked to show adjacent structures. If that oak tree is there, I doubt any building will be done in this area. So you'll have on the neighboring property, you'll have 9 feet of 3 feet, 2.5 feet of retaining, and then another 5.5 feet of fence. My question is, how long does that section run? Because I know it's also on the residential side.
Yeah, and that's why I presented this as potentially not having that fence there. And, maybe it's time to sit down with Bob Oswex, who has Bob's Well-Bred together and just kind of talk over this. But I obviously that's an excessive height there that we wouldn't be putting it up that high. There'd be a much lower fence. We want it to be neighborly and feel more open and not restricted. And I think with the proper planting there in that planting space beyond this perennial pavers, if you go back to the site plan, there's a significant planting area there. So Kevin's point is well taken. We'd select a plant material there between the two sites. So we've delineated some of Bob's Well-Bred next there. You can see the building outline and some of the other improvements I think have changed since we last did this. But yeah, we're going to be neighborly and want to make sure that feels open, comfortable, and doesn't feel too boxy when it comes down to it.
Is that same section on the east property line?
East property line. It's fairly simple, or fairly similar, yes. I know at one time in the last presentation I saw for the Myers property there to the east, there was a significant building, quite a large building in that area there. So I think we're both trying to respect one another in the space that's provided between the two buildings or the proposed buildings. So NBAR has not seen the presentation of our property next door?
No.
A quick question for staff. If indeed you have to bring this up 2 feet for flood control, wouldn't the Myers project to the east also have to? And thereby wouldn't really need the retaining wall.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not 100% familiar with the delineation of that flood zone. But I would imagine that the Myers project is subject to the same requirement.
If the elevations are a clue, you, on the 5-foot setback side, it looks like you've you covered that retaining wall with stone. And on the opposite side, it's kind of flush with the ground. So maybe that's what you're doing?
Well, unfortunately, I think it's a bad choice of graphics. It's actually a planting area. So it would be you can see if you zoom in on the drawing to the upper left-hand corner. Thank you. You can see the bold line below represents the drainage from that drainage basin. And so that's unfortunately a bad representation of planting or a hedgerow there. Just bad
Oh,
graphics.
that's not the retaining wall that we're seeing that looks like,
No, it would be below grade, so to allow that water to flow from the rear of the lot to to Bell Street,
so it's gonna be bare concrete?
which now,
The retaining wall that we just looked at previously?
I doubt it. We'll need to dress it up somewhat, give it more of a rustic look. There are ways to treat concrete with a washing effect after it's been set, maybe larger aggregate to give it an aged look. So that is what I would prefer to do.
Okay, figure out what you want to do, because there's stucco above it. However you want to deal with it.
Yeah, just bad choice of graphics. I apologize.
Well, the reality is that retaining wall may not even be there.
Yeah.
No,
Comparison is similar.
Yeah, it'll be a planting area.
Do any of the members have any additional comments?
I do.
Michael?
Hi, one more comment, and I know that this is a somewhat complicated row of stretch of buildings that are all sort of happening at the same time in Los Alamos. And I think some of the comments that I'm hearing suggest that it would be really, really helpful if for the next hearing, we might see actually how these three buildings relate to each other.
Streetscape,
Pardon me?
a streetscape
Yes.
would be helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. So I just, a couple quick things. If you can provide in bold outline, what is the existing building to the west on the site plan, so that we can identify what may or may not be conflicts.
I'm sorry.
And then,
I'm sorry. Did you say to the west? You're referring to Bob's Wellbred in this case?
yeah, Bob Wellbred, if we can
Uh-huh.
just bold out where the building is in
Okay.
relationship to your building. And I believe you've got preliminary plans for the Myers project.
I do. Uh-huh.
Okay, if we can kind of put it, give some context as to the relationship between that 1 foot setback and where the phony windows are.
So I do have a question relative to that. What is county planning helping to do with projects that were previously reviewed by CBAR but now become NBAR projects? Is there a follow through? Is there a system that informs your board as to what's been approved in Los Alamos under CBAR?
Man, I wish I had the answer for you because I wonder the same things. We do, and Tony, I will ask Tina to send you the most updated site plan for for the Myers project, because it has changed a little bit, I think, since she communicated with you previously, but
Okay.
I don't know that we have any materials that
What sort of project is it?
it's commercial in the front on Bell Street, and there's one residential unit above, and then there's three sort of cabanas that are short-term rentals in the rear, so they're technically considered commercial uses also.
Goes all the way to Wait, from Bell to Wait?
Yeah, it's a through lot, yeah.
Yeah, it's a comprehensive project, and their proposed structure is much larger than ours. So, there's definitely a scaling issue or a consideration to look at. So I just wondered how we make this connection with previous projects under CBAR versus the new process and review.
I mean, we're all sort of caught in this transition, a
Okay,
little bit unawares. So, I mean, I don't think that the Myers project will be back until after it goes to the planning commission, which will likely occur in the next 6 months. Then it would be coming back for preliminary and final. But we can get you what we have conceptually in advance of that, of course.
Yeah, I mean, Tony, well, I'm not requiring that you put it on your plan. I just want to know what's gonna happen next door, so.
no,
that we can kinda see it
actually,
in
I
context.
agree with you, and I've looked at that as it was in its previous form. It's changed since then, because again, remember, we first went to C-Bar over a year ago. So yeah, I'm curious too, and I'll do whatever it takes to accommodate that comparison.
Thank you.
I do have another comment. Given that this stretch between Augusta and Helena incorporates Plenty and Bob's and a soon-to-be-built dispensary building, plus the Show Cream project, plus the other building that
That's in the
goes
same block?
same block.
Yeah.
And I think, not that it necessarily needs to be a requirement, but I think for the benefit of the town, for the benefit of continuity, that it should be perceived as a streetscape as opposed to just disparate buildings. They all do need to relate to each other, otherwise it's going to be quite a jumble there.
Context.
Thank you.
Well, I agree with you, Michael, but it's not reasonable to ask this developer to provide all of that.
That's right.
Well, also too, I would keep in, just kind of remind everyone that when this town was built, 1800s, early 1900s, there was quite a conglomeration of different elevations, and each landowner, I'm sure, built what he could afford. So if, we're thinking about historic relativity, then, there's going to be some mix and match. I think the use of materials is always important, and what it looks like from a streetscape point of view. So I just throw that out there in terms of historic reference.
And I wasn't asking for it to be a requirement, by the way. I was just saying it might be a good
Because
to see it.
that's generally the
Right.
process of the general plan and the
Gotcha.
architectural guidelines.
Gotcha.
Yeah, Tony, if you could just maybe go to the, the lot adjacent and just kind of give us what Bob looks like, and then we'll see what the Myers project is going to come up with, just so we can have these 3 lots together.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds great.
Okay. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak on this item? Not seeing anyone raise their hand. Obviously, this is a conceptual review. This is the first time we're seeing it. We do have the comments from the first pass with C-Bar. I'm going to ask the board now with regards to more meetings on this particular project. Are you satisfied with what has been presented conceptually? And if so, we can talk about how you're going to come back to us, either for a preliminary or additional conceptual review. Members?
Well, I would personally prefer to see this come back conceptually, because I'd like to see how the residential second floor is integrated into this building. Particularly how the fenestration issues are dealt with on that side. I'm thinking Tony might need to take a look at that elevation, and we were briefly talking about the indentation there, and I didn't see that on the elevation, so I think.
Yeah, right there, with the 6 large windows.
Okay. So anyway, that would be my preferred approach.
Thank you. Any other members?
I agree.
I would agree.
Thank you very much. Okay, so Tony, these are suggestions as far as we aren't making any rulings, because you are being reviewed conceptually. So take these, work with staff, and come back with the items requested. And we'll see you again for conceptual review.
That sounds great. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate the comments.
Thank you.
Moving on now to the second item on today's agenda. It's the residential component for this extended lot, DAR number 21-00262. Tony, anytime.
Yeah, hello there. Okay, so as a back-to-back feature there and the sensitivity with potential for flood throughout Los Alamos, we also have a basin to the rear of this lot as well. So those two drainage basins, if you will be back to back and they're permeable. It looks like I've delineated what was previously proposed for the project next door, which I had as 21 LUP 00588. And those were footprints, I believe, for proposed structures. Yes, that's right, as well as that. So there was commercial / residential component towards the Bell Street side and smaller residential units to the rear towards Waite Street.
So Tony, the ones to the right, how tall or how bulky are those? Do you recall? The next door?
Well, when I saw the project last, they were two one-story structures. There might have been a slight loft in the larger structure there to the right, but they were I'll just say low rise. There was with steep pitch roof, I think 5 and 12, 6 and 12. Maybe Adam.
Residential.
Yes, residential aspect to them. I don't know whether they were short-term rentals or whatnot, but yeah, the residential aspect. So much lower in profile and height than the project to the front in Bell Street. So this project here, we have a total of 5 units. It is 3 stories in height, which the CMLA allows. So I've tried to keep the roof pitch and so forth low, but we anticipated that this lower unit here may be an ADA or an accessible unit. So there's a slight ramp up from Waite Street to the required building pad height of approximately 2 feet. It'll match the Bell Street side. So with that, the individual is able to enter through those areas on the backside with a need for a handicap ramp if needed versus the front street side. So we can go to the next sheet.
On that one, where's the second floor at?
It's we'll see that in the next page, but it's basically a stacked structure over that first floor. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Here's our engineering, just the front and back, which we subdivided these 2 parcels some time ago. Rather lengthy process, as you might imagine. Here's a legal document just showing the 2 parcels. I wanted to show the relationship. My understanding is that lots 1, 2, 3, and 4 adjacent to the east along Augusta. Yeah, that's a sort of a master plan, if you will, as one comprehensive project. This is our engineering for the Waite Street side, very similar to what we were doing on the Bell Street side, where we have permeable pavers over underground basin there at the top of the sheet or to the north. So it's quite similar. There are some trees, smaller trees that are adjacent to our property. I think the back half is also part of the Bob's Well-Bred project. So zooming in, we've got a number of parking spots on the back. Because we have a total of 5 units, we have 5 parking spots. We want to introduce some planting both on the east and the west side. So there where you see a SD, which is a drainage system where you have a planter there to the left or to the west property line. Okay, moving on to the next slide. This is our proposed lower level, considering our drainage considerations, our basin to the rear, or in this case to the north, and then our street improvements. We're working with Bethany Clough as the landscape architect for the project. Thought it'd be great to introduce some foliage there along Waite Street side. You know, it's going to be quite foreign. Waite Street hasn't had these types of improvements in this area, so we want to couple it with the Augusta project next door to the Myers project. So we kind of borrowed on their idea and concept for the sidewalk here. Along the westerly property line, we've got the same sort of thing where we need a drainage channel to help drain for overflow, which will take drainage from that back hatched area, if you will, for the drainage basin out to Waite Street. So it gets pretty complicated in terms of elevating one to meet the flood requirements as well as drainage for overflow. You know, which helps to set up a nice planter between this project and the project to the west. Okay, next. Here's our second floor with 3 units. We're looking at, or excuse me, 2 units. One's a small apartment type of studio space. The other is a 2-bedroom living unit. Great views, as you might imagine, for those of you who really know Los Alamos, east, west, south, there's some just great views. So trying to capitalize that with this balcony and for a nice place to catch a sunset or two. Next page. This is the third floor element, which is allowable by the CMLA zone. Again, just kind of a carbon copy of the first floor that you just saw there. Just a smaller balcony, less overhangs, that type of thing. This project was reviewed by CBAR well over a year ago, so there was some height considerations. We lowered the roof pitch and some other elements. Next page, please. So that white section there in the middle was at one point a gabled roof, so we flattened it. Yeah, there you go, to reduce some of the mass and volume through the center of the building. Same sort of details. We plan on high fire, so a lot of these materials will be made by either the Hardy company or someone else who makes a cementitious fire retardant board. Next page, please. Here are current elevations. Again, just to create sort of a rustic nature as much as possible. We want to use the use of awnings and so forth to break the sun on the south end of the building. And then that space in between was an intention to break up the mass of the 2 buildings with that exterior egress, stairs and railing. It's pretty typical. We would have a drive-through portal. Checking with the fire department, we did an early review with the fire department, and they're okay with the 3 feet to the west side for pulling hoses and things of that sort. The balconies, you know, with the tremendous views that we have throughout Los Alamos and really pretty much any direction, we're going to utilize, or we plan to utilize these walkways with the low railing with a sort of a rustic wire, which meets the code. So you'll see that those strong horizontals are that wire railing and guardrails, if you will. Divided light windows, just to give it a more of an older feel or look to it. And we can move to the next sheet. These are some of our sections. We've did what we can to get this thing under the 35-foot limit. So therefore the ceilings aren't what we had hoped. So we're at, I think it was 8.5 feet at the first floor, 8 foot for each of the other 2 floors. Okay, next. Just really more of the same. And I think the next page will give you an idea of the section for the driveway. Because it's elevated, we plan to have this ramp of sorts through the drive portal, and that'll bring us up to the required elevation for civil purposes. And then you can see the decks there, which afford, you know, a great view for renters or folks that are living here for a great sunset off to the west there. So that's why we designed it in that fashion. You get a sense for a shade structure or the awnings out front there. If you wanted to zoom in, that's the purpose for those. Yeah, they're to the right, just to the right of the elevation. I just wanted to point out the awnings for shade and for window protection facing, due south. Thank you. Okay, next, let's go to the next page, please. And this just gives you a sense of the building, the portal for necessary to get through to the drive-through, and how we plan to break up the elevations with awnings and a planting out front there. We do have a incorporated planner to take that front unit there, take it off the street about, I think it's 4 or 5 feet, give us a slight recess. And then you see on the back side there, because of those views, we'd have a delineated railing and balconies that can pick up the sunsets to the west. Okay, next, please. It's more of the same, trying to give the committee an opportunity to look at how we've broken up the elevations, especially on the rear side there, and our drive portal to get to the rear parking. Okay, next, please. This is our current landscape plan, so we're trying to introduce as much planting between the properties as possible. Again, with our drainage swale, we'll have some sort of shrubs or something there between our project and the west-facing property, I believe also owned by Bob and Jane Oswax, who have Bob's Wellbred. The tree, as I mentioned, out at the roadway or the street there on Waite, along with some additional planting just to break up that elevation. And because our spaces will be open, at least the last Myers plan that I saw, there was a considerable amount of open space there to the left where the shrubs are a yellow color. So that space is fairly open between the two buildings, or the two properties. I think that concludes most of my comments. I'm ready for any questions you may have.
This is Jim. On the site plan, there's 4 parking spaces. I don't know what page that's on. Let's see.
It was there on the landscape plan as well.
A21.
Yeah, there's a total of 4 that are towards the rear of the property. Yeah, that's a great illustration.
On that one, can you diagram next time how maneuverability works in there?
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Because my mother would get stuck.
She wouldn't give you.
Well, we have a spot reserved for her out at the street.
Don't believe it. No. At any rate, I think that's going to be very difficult to maneuver. So you show me how it works.
Sure.
Okay.
I think it's doable, Jim. I've seen much worse in Santa Monica.
People are still in those spots in Santa Monica. Then if we go to the elevations. I have a lot of concern with the height of the project, and it's the 3-story element on Waite across the street from 1-story houses. It doesn't seem to be too compatible with anything in the area. Is there any way to step back the 2nd, 3rd floor to give a little bit better handshake to the neighborhood?
Well, there are, yeah, handshake is great. I've done a lot of work there and I'm sensitive to it. There are projects, especially on Augusta there, I believe it is. It's got a 3-story element. I think it's maybe right at the same height. But yeah, there's that sensitivity with trying to provide the housing element within Los Alamos, sticking within the design guidelines and the CMLA. I think we've done that. So, I don't know what other concessions could be made, but I'm all ears. So I appreciate the comments.
On the other page, you've got a building height, but it comes from the slab. So show your building height calculations from the grade, I believe, the existing grade.
Yes.
Where is it?
On the east elevation, there's a dimension line right there.
We have the same comment in our letter.
What is that one? Says he 36 feet, I can't see.
Yeah, so I think that, it depends on where we took the ground elevation there, Jim.
So isn't 35 the max?
It is.
Okay, make sure that works. But I
Yeah, I
still
think-
have,
Yeah,
it's not, I'm not saying it's easy to
no,
design something that fits in a community, but it doesn't.
yeah. Well, is that your opinion or what, maybe express yourself a little further? Because if it falls within the CMLA, it's just going to be a matter of saying, hey, development's happening. We're doing our best to build a project within those parameters.
That we're only here for our opinion. Mine is that the second, third floor needs to be pushed back or lowered or eliminated in order to try to make it compatible with the neighborhood.
Okay,
I think, this is Steve, I think I do share those opinions that the massing here is kind of monumental. Without any breaking up of those straight walls. Particularly along the lower right-hand one that's against that property line. I think that's gonna be visible from a long ways off as just a big massive wall. I think that maybe perhaps you could study that a little bit more and maybe alter the floor plan so that perhaps rather than simply just stacking the units, second, third floor, maybe they can be flip-flop so that you can get the one bedroom unit to the right-hand side there and possibly create some visual delineation on those facades. Again, I agree with Jim. It's not an easy task. So we're getting big money, but that would be kind of my comment on that.
Could you repeat that for me real quick? Study the floor plan design and moving the studio unit
Maybe,
to.
well, just a suggestion, and maybe you could figure out a way to flip-flop that so you get the one bedroom unit to the one side and create some,
Reduce the apparent mass.
yeah. Just to break up the massing. I know he's progressed pretty far on your drawings here, and I'm definitely sympathetic to the difficulties here.
well, keep in mind, we have been seen by CBAR and we didn't have the same kind of comments. So, feeling comfortable with moving and making the changes that were recommended by CBAR. So I think the county has to work out some of the
I thought that was one of their comments. Is it not?
Three-story structure.
well, these comments, I think, are combined with both the Bell Street and the Wayne Street side.
The CBAR comment says the three-story structure is not in conformance with the character of the community,
But it is allowed by the CMLA, so
but it still isn't.
I think there's a conflict there with the county that should be taken up with planning, so I'll address that with our planner.
Okay.
I think I just want to add, so, the 35-foot height limit applies in most areas of the county, right? And, we also have design guidelines in certain areas of the county through the community plan. But ultimately, the findings of the BAR are subjective in nature. So, there's discretion there in how to interpret neighborhood compatibility, regardless of what the objective requirements are for a zone.
Yeah, Tony, I don't think we're saying you can't build a three-story. We're just saying, just consider neighborhood compatibility with it. Now, do we have, now with the project that's going to be built on the east, what are those buildings?
Well, I
They're
think,
single-story buildings?
yeah, there's a mix, the larger mixed-use structure, which to me appears like a rustic barn. It's pretty large in nature, in size and scope and massing. So, that coupled with this building, although they're not directly adjacent to one another, the massing is probably fairly similar. In fact, that building is larger. So, I'll have to get advice from our planner, Adam, in this case, to see how we bring a project that was reviewed under a separate board. And then
They had the same comments.
Well, I don't think the separation of boards is going to make a difference anymore because you'll be coming in front of us And while we appreciate the comments of CBAR, you know, you're gonna go through the process with us. So we will take those comments in consideration, but it's not gonna be a driving force in it. The other comment would be with the previous project, you know, we would like to get some continuity between the three lots, the east lot and the west lot. So as you develop your plans for this, you know, kind of identify what is proposed on the Wade side, what is proposed adjacent. Shannon has indicated that we've got 2-story buildings on that proposed, so it may have changed since the last time you saw it. I think it'd be a good idea to incorporate some of that into the presentation so that we can speak to neighborhood compatibility with regards to the stacked units you presented.
Yeah, that's points well taken. You know, I just didn't want to lose this opportunity to get your comments. So, you know, we had been more prepared with our CBAR presentation, but at this point, I really welcome the comments.
Comment too.
Do any other members have comment?
That's it for me.
Okay, I reviewed the landscape, it seemed fine, but I also share the concern of the massing of this building and sitting in the neighborhood. I'm involved in the Meyer project to the east, and those buildings at front on Wade Street are single story at this time.
Thank you, Joe. Michael?
I agree with the height issue. Strongly, actually, given that there is a permission to do, shall we say, 35 feet and 3 stories. This is going to break precedent because there is not another structure in Los Alamos currently that is 3 stories, particularly on Wade Street, with most of those houses being back there much, much smaller and all 1 story.
Okay, thank you. At this time, I'm going to ask if there's anyone in the audience that would like to speak on this particular project. Not seeing anyone raise their hand. Does the board have additional comment? Okay. Well, Tony, as again, your agenda is conceptual. I'd really like you to take some of these suggestions, work with your planner, work with your design team, and see if we can't come back with either more information as to the projects on either side of you to give that context that you're looking for. If not, work with your design to take the
Yeah, something's happened with the audio. I lost the volume.
Okay, well,
Oh, that's much better. Great, thank you.
work with your planner and your design team, take these suggestions, and see if we can't find some kind of common grounds with regards to what is being proposed on the adjacent property in single story levels, and then what is existing on the opposite side. Do you have any other questions for us?
Well, I think, you know, like any new development and especially a town of Los Alamos's age and historical significance, there are other projects that have similar massing, and I intend to show those as well. And they're in general proximity. I believe there's some houses there, 2 stories. They almost look 3-story with a steep pitch gable on Augusta, which can be seen from this property. So there are other examples, and I'll do my best to illustrate that, but your point's well taken. I think there's some massaging that can occur here, and we'll go about that.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank
All
you.
right, great, thank you.
All right. So we are moving on to agenda item number 3. I'm gonna step down for this. Kevin will be the chair. Don't know, have a good weekend, guys.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Can we turn the lights up a little bit?
It was on the, yes, commercial. Consider adding articulation on the
So,
study.
item number 3, 00057, Orchid Area Seniors in Service, Oasis Senior Center. I see that you're here.
This is agendized for preliminary.
Yes, your agenda is for preliminary review. We have seen this once before, made a bunch of comments. In the interest of full disclosure, I did work with the Oasis Senior Center on another site several years ago. This is a whole new project, and I'm not currently involved with that. So I saw Tom.
I'm sure.
Okay. Lori, are you going to present?
I'll start.
Okay, so introduce your team and yourself for the record, please.
Great, thank you. Lori Tamora, Urban Planning Concepts, Land Use Consultant in San Maria. We're here today for the preliminary review of the Oasis Center. This project is located in Old Town Orchid. It did go through the Planning Commission review for a couple of years. We did have an environmental impact report, community engagement, and the Planning Commission reviewed it, and also the Board of Supervisors approved the project. So I'd like to just orient you, and then Tom Martinez, the architect, will get into the details of the design. We also have with us today Michelle Southwick, who is the executive director of the Oasis Center, and Don Flegg, who is on the construction committee and is also a contractor, and Steve Labard, who is an adjacent landowner who's recently sold his property but is still involved in the project, right?
I'm just here.
Oh, okay. And so we're very excited to be here. This is a big project for Orchid. And Shannon was very helpful in getting us through that process. And we're working through, I believe we counted about 100 conditions on the project. So this is an important step because it means the project can move into more of the construction plans and also deal with some of the other conditions that were part of the original project. So we appreciate staff putting this on the agenda and giving us direction to move forward. And so with that, I'm available for any questions as we move through for the planning side, and I'll bring Tom Martinez up for review of the actual design of the project.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, I just wanted to point out again, I have it on the screen that there was a planner memo for this project.
Is the planner present?
Hi, Chair. I'm Adam. I'm Adam. I'm here.
Yeah, Adam's the planner on the project.
Okay, Adam, is there anything you wanted to speak to before we go to Mr. Martinez?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, just to reiterate, kind of piggyback what Lori was saying. Staff doesn't recommend granting more preliminary approval just at this time. We're still waiting on the agents to address the just substantial amount of conditions that revolve around not only just additional permits, applications that have yet to be submitted to P&D. So we really just wanted to bring this project to you now to get as much feedback as possible while they're still incorporating a lot of the conditions into the project. And I don't have any questions or further comments at this time.
Mr. Chair, I do have a quick question.
Yes.
Three of us were not present back in 2017 on the board, so if, Tom, if you would just give us a little bit of background, kind of get tied up at this point a little bit, because at least I'm not aware of it, so. Thank you. I appreciate it.
And I appreciate the question. Yes, this project has been going on for a long time. This is the site plan. If we could bring that back. The site plan of the project, you can see along the south side is Clark Avenue. As you're going up the hill into Old Town Orchid, there's a little pie-shaped piece right at the corner of Clark and Foxwood Lane. And there is an approved project for that particular corner. And the collaboration between that site and the driveway that moves down into the dip, is what, we refer to it, is where the Oasis Center will be located. So as you go up Clark Avenue, you kind of look down into the Orchid Creek area. There's a nice flat grassland area, and that's where the building is located.
There were story poles there at one time?
There were, yes.
Okay, I am familiar with the location.
Yes.
Kind of down in the drainage basin there.
Correct. And part of this project involves some legal issues with the originally recorded map for the South Point subdivision. So when you look at all of the case numbers associated with this project, one of them is a map modification to remove the do not build designation on that site. The Board of Supervisors approved that amendment to the map. And so part of our process is to record a new map to remove that designation.
Understood.
Yeah, and so then you have the other piece of the issue or project was a number of easements that needed to be coordinated between Mr. Labar's property, which was the little triangle piece, and access points going down to the Oasis Center. So access, utilities, grading and drainage, a number of easements that were involved with that, along with a coordination with the county Parks and Recs Department in regards to an easement coming down the driveway for a bike trail.
Trail easements, okay.
And you can see how the bike trail moves north from the driveway, bends over
I don't
along
see
the
it.
property line.
Where does the bike trail daylight onto Foxwood Lane?
Oh, okay.
If my mic, it basically comes down
Okay, so
the walkway, crosses, and comes around.
Where's the walkway, Tom? The-
okay, so Tom, I have a pointer.
I'm not used to this technology.
I take a laser.
I thought he was chasing it.
Open them up.
Wasn't he?
Good old days.
He was chasing the pointer. That's.
So again, you have Foxwood Lane here. This is the driveway. It meets fire department requirements. And then there, because of the grade separation along here, there's a separate pedestrian walkway that was designed for ADA access. So
Didn't
the
we-
slope differentials.
Didn't we have one coming up the hill last time?
The code requires you to take to the public.
And it was a-
There was an
problem?
idea of putting a path right here, but again, that was a stairwell because of the grade differential so much.
So now people that are gonna walk there from Orchid have to walk down to Foxwood Lane and then take a,
Correct. If we did anything else, stairways or whatever, we'd also have to do the ADA ramp down and take off half the hill.
because that's who's
So it
walking there.
was a deliberative choice to go this route with a sidewalk walkway and then coming down this pathway and then the crosswalk to the Oasis Center building. The bike trail also has this connection here, comes around, and then we are working on the easement on the adjacent landowner to connect to a alternate bike trail out to California. And so this will be a pedestrian bike trail access for the community. And so one of the easements that we had to work through was having public access in this area. That
Where does the water come into this site? Is it up above it? from under the freeway?
Yeah, the utilities are, yes, there's a water line that will be coming down here as well as PG&E and gas. And
No, I mean rainwater overflow
Oh.
stuff.
Yeah, it'll come down and convey through the site, and this is our on-site basin.
Was there flooding in the last month?
If I might add, there is a creek that
I got it.
Yeah, the creek. There's the creek.
crosses right up underneath, and then it goes to the northeast,
There it is.
northeast corner, and comes back and around.
So all the water was channeled that way. Did you have any flooding on the site?
The site, the Orchid Creek channel itself is pretty incised. And there has not been any water contained on this property. The flood control, this particular map doesn't show the flood line, but we're outside of it.
Okay, because there was a lot of work down in California.
Yeah, there was. And that's where the other basins are too, you know, for South Point and everything else is down by California.
Are those pipes permanent or are they just temporary that they put in?
I'm not familiar with that.
I think you're
I believe they're permanent. We were contacted by multiple agencies in regards to that work, yeah.
And so the design of the project, one-story building with architectural features that match Old Town Orchid. And I'll turn, unless there's any other questions in
No,
regards
you've
to
covered
the
my question.
project.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, there's about 11 easements. 9 of them have been recorded already, and the other 2 are tied to the map recordation process. So we've accomplished a lot to get to this point, and now we have to focus our energies on all of the other conditions.
Lori, is there anything you wanted to talk about it being one of the key sites or the Orchid community plan? Does that play into any of this or?
Well, this was one of the key sites. It was key site 18, which for those in the Orchid area, the Orchid community plan was adopted in 1997. And we've been developing Orchid over that period of time. The analysis for this particular project had many policy discussions in the staff report in regards to that particular key site, as well as other provisions within the Orchid community plan related to recreation and parks particularly. And that's why the way the community plan was written, it encouraged some kind of recreational amenity on this particular site. And although it did have conflicts with previously recorded maps, the board agreed that this would be an appropriate and a best way to put it, a win-win for the community, because you have a nonprofit that's willing to develop this, that in the Orchid community plan was going to be active recreation park in some way.
I'm unfortunately familiar with that because I worked on that committee, so a number of years ago now, but.
Is the section to the right of the big, is that also part of the Oasis?
This
That
piece,
guy?
no,
Okay, so you can't do any landscaping or any kind of, so that's just gonna stay the way it is?
it is privately owned. And one of the easements that was provided is an easement that comes down and runs through the parking lot, and it L shapes to provide access to the site. So we didn't have a non-accessible property,
What is the current zoning on that parcel?
recreation.
It is, okay.
Yes. So I'm available for any follow-up questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So this project initially came to the board probably 8-10 years ago. And it was initially designed by Vivek Harris. And he actually brought it in way early on to kind of just get an aesthetic concept, even before conceptual. He just brought it to the board and got very supportive comments from the committee. We brought it back a couple of years ago, then we had all of the delays with all the easements, et cetera. So what we have is, the basic project that initially started. The building really hasn't changed that much, trying to fine tune some of the areas and comments that have been presented by the commission previously. As As Lori indicated, the access is off of Foxton. So we have the ADA access, et cetera. Fire access that comes all the way to the back of the parcel. For that turnaround, the fire department has reviewed and approved this so that they have dual access. Also, it provides, there's an easement that follows that to get to the private property back here that is owned by a Mr. Knight. I think it's Len Knight, if I'm not mistaken. So there's a number of parcels, as Lori said, there's this parcel here that had to have access. There's this parcel here that had to have access. So that kind of complicated. That's one of the reasons that we were delayed for so long in coming back. The basic building has not changed at all. We've got a primary building of approximately 14,000 square feet, which is the main facility for the Oasis organization. They're going to have some offices with it. If we go to the next slide, well, let's stay on this. There's the primary building that is most of the events. There is a large community hall. Second building, which is more for storage. There is some pottery classes, some kilns that are within that, and a barbecue area.
While you're on that, Tom, what's the slope down the driveway? What's
I
from
want to
the,
say it's
from
about 7%,
Boxwood
5 to 7%.
Boxwood Lane to the
It drops from here all the way down. Like I say, there's about a transition here of probably 8 to 10 feet.
So you said it's a handicap slope?
This walkway here meets accessibility. That's one of the reasons we had to move the wall so that, because we're basically up against the hill.
And the parking lots are asphalt?
Yes. Except for this area here, which is a class 2 gravel base.
Into the driveway going off to the hinterland on the left,
This is just native grasses. That's just an easement there. We basically come in paving to here. This is class 2 all-weather base to kind of keep everything soft.
So that's not asphalt either.
No, asphalt stopped right at this point. All of the parking from this point back and here is asphalt, class 2 base. We just didn't get the texture on it. Next slide. This is just an enlargement of the same, I can't even recall what this was depicting. I think we
It was the split page.
blew it up. So, okay, the next page. But I'm sorry, I didn't set the exhibits down.
It's okay.
So this is again, just an enlargement of the site plan, accessible parking. There is a bus turnaround. We're working on an agreement with Smooth to provide access. Smooth has been discussed. There have been discussions about Smooth getting naming for the entry. So there's some elements they wanted us to do up in front. So we might tweak that just a little bit. But they were thinking that we would have access. They could come around, drop people off. We have accessible parking here. And then the primary entrance to the facility is right in that corner.
Are those trees just graphic or are they coordinated with the landscape plan?
Coordinated with a landscaping plan. We do have a landscape detail sheet with some call outs on it later on in the presentation.
Can the buses turn around on that gravel?
No, buses will be using this, which is all of this is asphalt.
Okay, so they can't go down and loop around at your barbecue area? The buses?
Well, they can come in here. Well, they can because it's a class 2 drivable base.
But it's big enough to do it.
But for accessibility, there would be dropping people off here because we need a control point for the members that are attending the events.
And there's 2 points also for that. The Smooth buses are the small ones. They're about 10 passenger buses. They're not the full, not a school bus. And the other thing is that the trees depicted on this plan, there's no trees on this site. The only trees that are currently existing are the ones that are shadowed in just
this creek.
Well.
Yeah, I just wanted to know if there was-
Those right there.
Sometimes you just graphically stick stuff on the plan.
Right. I just wanted to make sure that this site is all grasslands.
Okay, yeah. Seen
And
it.
in actuality, these are, I want to call them immature trees. They're not significant. When we get to this area, these are heavy, large oaks that kind of dominate and actually screen all of this property until you get right into the opening on Foxwood. Next slide.
Are you gonna have significant grading on this site?
It's, there's 4,000 yards of cut and then filled, so most of it, we try to balance it as much as possible to get it up to control the drainage. Again, the back end where the barbecue area is, there's a hiking trail, a little exercise trail for the members to come around. Circular parking, as we mentioned, and here's our retardation basin.
That's my question about buses. You know, if you're dropping people off at a barbecue area, do you need to have a bus radius turn there? Is that, I don't know what the scale of that is.
Well, this satisfies fire department.
Okay, so it's 80 feet.
And it's a
80 feet
smaller
to the
bus,
car.
it's a smaller bus than the fire truck would be.
Like a van.
Yeah, so it's 80 foot probably to the cars.
But the barbecue is more for the events. It's not like we're gonna have the public coming to barbecue. They're gonna be coming to events that are happening within, and they're providing the barbecue services from this point. We also have a kitchen within the facility for, the smaller events, et cetera.
You have outside barbecues that people could use though, right? Or do
That's
you?
what it is. That's the outside barbecue.
I mean, like little barbecue.
So as you can imagine, this project had a lot of community engagement.
Mhm.
And the concern raised from the South Point neighborhood was how the events would overwhelm the site. And so the conditions of approval say anything that is a special event occurs inside.
Okay,
Noises are the music, amplified music, anything like that is inside. The barbecue area is for doing the food for that event, but everything is happening inside. Now, for the day-to-day operations, if there's seniors doing yoga or exercise or whatever, that can happen outside. But as far as any major event that is going to be rented for, a birthday party or whatever, the event happens inside. And
is there a gate on the driveway?
no,
It'll be
because we
open all
have
the
to
time.
leave it open for the public. So the hours of operation are usually between 8 and 3 for the seniors. And then there's opportunities for communities, organizations to rent the facilities from 3 to, I believe, don't get me wrong. I think it's like 7 o'clock for things like Ellen Hancock College doing classes, their dance classes and those kind of things. We've had obviously the youth organizations like Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts.
So there's lighting out there in that area, exterior lighting?
No,
No.
there's low lighting because we have to meet the county's requirement for dark sky compliant as well as being sensitive to the creek area. And again, that's those 100 of conditions that we have to,
We'll go through all of them.
A quick question for planner there is what constitutes a special event?
Well, the special events for this property are very specifically outlined in the project description. Frankly, I can't remember what they were, but it's very clear what can happen and what can't happen on this property.
And how many a year, or is there a finite number?
For
Yes.
certain types, there's a finite number, yeah.
so if it's tied to an Oasis activity, a special Christmas event,
Sure.
that's not covered under special events. Special events are outside of the rental agreements. And there's a definition for those that are under 100 people. And there's a definition for anything over 100 people.
Okay, well, that clarified. Thank you.
Yeah, so it was well nuanced
It was very nuanced.
through the process. So we have a rental agreement that we need to post or provide. And then we also have to have it posted on the website, all of the provisions for the use of this building. So it is first and foremost for Oasis seniors and community members. And then beyond that, it's coordination with rentals.
There was a lot of discussion about those community events, believe me. So again, as we were discussing, the barbecue area is coordinated with the barbecue. There is the craft room primarily is in this corner. There is a pottery class, but they have some kilns out here as well. So there's a connection between those two. We actually, and you'll see in the floor plan as we get to it, this was actually slid over so that the barbecue area was not directly behind and blocked by the building, because it will be doing Santa Maria style barbecue. So the prevailing wind is bringing it this way and going to direct it around there. Of course, we'll be controlling these, the exhaust from that with some odor control elements within the barbecue hood. So next slide. Again, this is just an overview showing utilities that we had to bring in, and this is all part of the Lavard agreement, where we brought utilities down here, some of the utilities that we had to bring down that hill and that slope. And, we talk about the slope, you asked about the stairway that was originally there. Again, when they initially did that, they thought it would be very convenient, but when we started looking at, I actually had to discuss this carefully with the building code. Unfortunately, the building code, because it sounded great as an alternate site, but any access that you provide for the able-bodied, you must provide accessibility. So that created some switchbacks that were just horrendous. And again, on a slope like that, it all had to be concrete. To get a good foundation, it was just getting horrendously expensive. So we basically just took that off the table. There is access, or there will eventually be access, we believe, because there is the trail that comes back and hooks back to California. There actually could eventually be some access, I'm not sure, at the end of some of these streets from Old Orchid that could come down off that backside, because this whole area starts sloping down and gets relatively accessible from this side, where when you look at from this point, or even from the south point, we're about 30 feet, 35 feet below those levels. So next slide. Again, just showing the pathways, the hard surfaces coming through, again, the walkway, all the way around the hiking trail, etc. Next slide. These are the story poles that we put up through part of the initial processing through the planning commission, because the neighbors were concerned about the height, the visual, etc. So we put the story poles up, and it became evident after putting those up that the neighbors to the south, or to the north-south point, really were not ever going to be able to see even the tops of the building, which is about 28 feet, unless they were actually standing at their fence line, peeking over that 6-foot high fence, because we are significantly below that. This picture here, is taken from across the street, or on the park side, up above on the hill. And we're looking down on it, but you can see the tops of the story poles, and you can see the residences. So you can see that 6-foot fence is actually a few feet above the highest point of that building. So they're really, if anybody's sitting in their backyard, they're really not going to have the visual unless they walk right up against that fence line. Next slide. This is just the topo of the area. Again, everything sloped from here all the way down to the creek element. But next slide. Preliminary drainage plan. Again, it's just an enlargement. Well, actually, and that's not even the drainage plan. It references the drainage plan there. It's just showing flow lines, the collection points to get the base, get the water to the basin. Next slide. Again, you can see the routing of the containment drainage basin, I'm sorry, drop inlet, picking up the drainage and bringing it over here to the basin, up and around the building. Next slide. Site planting, I believe Kevin had seen this, commented on that they wanted to add some more trees along the edge to soften the building a little bit. We are kind of limited with space, so we couldn't put too much here in front, just because it's gonna overtake, and the trees are not gonna have an area where they can grow well, you know, in these small little areas between the walkway, which is required for accessibility, and the front of the building. Next slide. Again, just an enlarged site, planting plan, showing the trees and all of the various planters, trees around the back to soften it. And again, be mindful that there are no trees whatsoever in this entire basin, except for there's a few around the
You said there were oaks,
perimeter
I think,
somewhere.
right?
Pardon me?
You said there were oaks next to the street?
There are oaks.
Is that what you said that earlier?
Well, there are oaks on the creek side, yes, on the east side where the channel, I'm not sure what the name of the creek is that comes into it, crosses under the expressway and then goes around to the northeast and across the north border. All of those are primarily oaks.
It's Solomon Creek.
Solomon Creek, okay.
It's off the headwaters, off the peak up there and towards Los Alamos.
Thank you. Next slide. Again, just an enlargement of the planting plan on the easterly side of the building. And the area here is, you know, it's tough to plant. This is really so steep. And you can see where we've had to add retaining walls in these lines just to catch that drainage and not wash that walkway away. So it's tough to add any plantings. This is actually a separate parcel as well. But you can try to put in planting wherever we can in all the little finger islands, etc. Next slide. Okay, this is just an overview of the building. This is the first building, approximately 14,000 square feet, as I mentioned. This is the entry point. There's a lobby, there's a little office, a couple of offices, a little two-story element right above for the office for the executive director, a small library, and then a series of meeting rooms, craft rooms, etc., for the different activities and programs that they run. Restrooms, a number of restrooms to facilitate the larger meeting room, and let's call it event center for the different activities that they have. I know we participated, my wife and I, in some of the dance classes, and there might be at times 20 or 30 people. So it's a little tough to be dancing in a small room like that. So we've got a nice large room with high ceilings, so it doesn't get so warm in there. This might be where weddings occur, etc. And commercial kitchen for any kind of wedding reception type element. And again, another craft room. There's some miscellaneous storage rooms.
So Tom, up is out to the barbecue area, right?
The barbecue area is right up here, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Because there's that last craft room, and there's a tie between it and the pottery room in the back, which is within the that second building, correct? Next slide. Again, this is just the dimension plan for that first floor. Next slide. Again, just an enlargement of that same first half of it with lobby, reception area, program director, accounting, storage for miscellaneous chairs, etc. for the event center, I refer to it, and for the large meeting room. Next slide. This is just the dimension plan for that. Next slide. This is a keynoted plan identifying, desk furnishings, et cetera, for the different activities. Those are not any of those fixed elements. They're all, just anticipated layout. Next slide. Dimension floor plan of that building. Next slide. Excuse me. Sorry, I should turn that off. No. Sorry, my phone's tied to my hearing aids. I'm old. This is just a roof plan for that second building. There is an attic area over the top of the larger building. And actually, I'm sorry, my apologies. This is the second floor for that center. And this is the little office for the executive director.
So that's over the entry lobby, right?
That is correct. This
And
is
that's the
the
only-
entry lobby right here.
That's the only two-story element and you're tucking it in the roof.
Yes, it's under the roof, basically that roof line of that the big meeting room, correct. Next slide. This is the floor plan of the barbecue area. This is the barbecue area. There is the, I can't read that. I'm sorry. Can you enlarge this area? Because there is a storage, I'm sorry, there's a storage component. These are the two kilns, and this is just the outdoor art area. This is actually a roll-up overhead door, just to give them some outdoors feeling. And then a pair of doors that would be glass to just to open up the area. Unisex restrooms for anybody that's participating out here for the barbecue crew. Again, if we could slide this over. A commercial Santa Maria style barbecue, and again, with the hood that will be used over the top to control exhaust and odors coming off of that. 3 compartment sinks, etc. Because they will be having events, it really needs to meet commercial kitchen standards. So, next slide. This is just to depict the well area. So we didn't have a bunch of mechanical equipment sitting up on top of the roof. We basically have created a well between, and everything is designed around a prefabricated metal building system because we wanted to get the volume, but we wanted to keep it as low as possible. And by using the metal beams, we make smaller elements and kind of hold everything down so that we're not, getting it up high where it affects any of the views from either side coming around. So this is just the framing for that well for all of our mechanical equipment. Next slide. Again, a roof plan showing the wells, mechanical equipment that we can service from both sides off of this. This is just a roof element to create some architectural detailing on the front and the back of the building. And then these will be the solar panels that will be facing to the south on the building roof. Next slide. Again, just a roof plan of the barbecue building. There'll be a mechanical well as well. So very similar in the layout where we've got conceptually 2 smaller building elements. And then solar panels.
That's open in the middle, right?
Yes, that is correct. Next slide. Okay, exterior elevation of the building, the primary building. This is actually the entry and again, primarily glass at that front entry. This is the administrator's office. So we've got glass because there's lower offices and then upper offices. Breakup of the elements just to not have the feel of one big square box, which is typically what happens with a metal building. So we've added a roof, a gable element here, and change the direction. The wall panels are prefabricated metal with a batten finish, a copper-looking color, and it gives a batten finish, so it actually looks like wood. But again, we have the longevity and weather protection with the prefabricated metal skin. So we were using that in both elements and then breaking it up horizontally, same element, just a lighter color, and right in the middle, just again, to create some variation, have a feeling of, breaking up of those masses. On the side, we've got on the west elevation, it's pretty much the same thing. The ability to open up with double doors for on those nice days where you can get some good comfortable weather inside. We're using roof elements, canopies to shade the west and the south elevation. This is the north elevation that is basically facing the creek. The roof element is also prefabricated metal with a snap clip metal seams, and it'll be light in color, more of a galvalume to again just create a more of an elegant barn feel to reflect more of the rural, semi-rural area that down in that basin and of Orchid. Next slide. Again, the barbecue room, trying to create some variation with roof and small element. So we've got the two components, and then this is the top where basically is the that open area. This is kind of false in the front, and then there's open well in between for mechanical equipment. Same material as what is on the main building. Next slide. Generic sections of the building. Again, executive director's office, you can see the volume that we're getting with that, so that when you get behind it into the larger meeting room, you can see that we now have the ability to have some volume within that. Next slide. Again, just a different perspective, but here's where we're basically having to transition from two metal buildings to that flat roof element in between, where we'll be able to put mechanical equipment, and then the mechanical equipment is screened from each end from a false roof element on either side of that. Next slide. Again, this is just a section of the barbecue area. When we're conventional with that, because of its size, it can be wood. And so we've got the metal, flat metal roof system for the mechanical equipment within that. Next slide. Is that it? Okay, so the landscaping plan was active. The packet that I have has got the landscaping plan at the tail end, and it's got an L1 and L2. So that's in the middle. So that concludes our presentation. Available for questions or comments. Appreciate your comments.
Where to start?
Tom, I have just a couple quick questions. Are the metal panels on the exterior, are those insulated panels like a Kingspan type panel, or are they just more like the
No,
Varco-proof type?
because we have to finish the inside of the building, we probably just use steel studs and just insulate those walls so that we can run electrical, et cetera, on the inside face.
And then you're bracing it with quarter columns? or-
Portal frames.
Okay.
Yes, yes. Yeah, that we've used insulated panels, like in cold rooms, et
Oh,
cetera,
yeah,
but they're very efficient, but they're very expensive.
they are indeed.
Yeah.
So Tom, I noticed on you're doing your sections, the second floor had a window the bottom floor had a window, but on your exterior elevations, the windows go from either to spandrel glass in the middle or.
That's false. The middle is going to be false because that's basically in the floor line.
Yeah,
So it's going to be there with the tinting of the windows, you basically won't see that they're basically false windows.
okay. I've also looked at your exterior entry on the main building. I'd like to see some more sections in both directions to see what you're doing with the ceiling and how how you're dealing with that vertical element with the sign on it, and delineate that whole front better. And when you develop it,
Okay,
but more sections, there's one section that's kind of just shows through the exterior plane, through the column, but, do one that's pushed back a little bit and in the other direction as well, because there's stuff going on. You want that front to look really slick.
right, okay.
Okay. On the little building, the barbecue building, I think if you look at the east elevation, if you take the left bathroom and you flip the stuff in it the other way to push the door over to make it symmetrical, I know that you've got a plumbing wall, but 2 plumbing walls, so what?
Right.
So if you flip it around, the door will move over about 1.5 feet and it'll be symmetrical about that gate, which would look better.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
that's something can easily be done, sure.
And the little on the right side, you said you were gonna deal with the smoke. Is that element on the roof a smoke?
It's a hood within the attic
I was looking
area.
at how does the smoke get out? I don't see the holes anywhere.
Yeah, we will have to have some sort of
Talking
an
about like
exhaust.
a captive air type hood,
Right.
Tom?
Right.
Commercial
We
hood.
hadn't really gone into that much in a lot of detail.
I
because, again,
think-
we're just getting into the conduits at this point.
Yeah, but that shape, is like a barn shape. There's a
Right.
lot of things you can do with it. So I'd study that real hard to see if it needs to be a smidgen taller for ventilation, or maybe bring it to the front to have a different shape. Or, right now it's kind of like in between where it should be, but I don't remember where I saw the section. But it didn't look like there was any ventilation up there, so, oh, there it is. Yeah, it showed it kind of open on the, where'd it go?
Okay,
There it is.
right.
Yeah, what you're doing with the thing on the right. It also had a lot longer overhangs than it looked like than on the elevation, which I like the long overhangs.
Okay.
So I would work on that.
So Tom, you're proposing to put a commercial type hood over that barbecue?
Oh, yes, yeah.
It's a tricky thing because of the fire suppression.
Mhm.
You can't shut off the gas.
Right, right.
So the ones I've run into in the past, they wanted water systems. So maybe you want to talk to somebody like Captive Air on that.
Okay.
They're
Yeah.
specialists at this.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I did the 181 industrial heats over there and we ran into that issue.
Okay.
And the embers and the grease filters and the works, so. Very tricky. Just did a call.
Okay.
Did you have any?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Tom, back on the front elevation of the main building, where there's essentially three gables. Right. Of the main building, yeah, right there.
Right.
So the center section is essentially a parapet.
That is correct, yes, yes.
How deep is that?
It's not deep at all. It's on the front face.
So it's like a foot?
Yes. Oh, well, no, right now it's flush.
It was 1.5 feet back, I thought. I remember looking at it earlier.
Can we go back to the floor plan real quick then?
It was something small, but there was a jump.
Go back to the floor plan.
I think he's asking what the depth of the well is.
No, not the well.
Oh, there it is right there. Yeah, it's approximately 1.5 feet then. You're correct. I'm sorry.
Is that right?
There is the dimension, you can go up to the dimension plan.
Oh, there it is. 20 inches.
Yeah. So it's not significant, because I think we originally had it on that front face and we just changed the direction to give it that sense of recess. And I think that was one of the comments from the conceptual that we brought it in.
Thank you.
Hi,
How are you?
good, how are you? You must be worn out from doing all this. ridiculous. I mean, this is a huge project and.
Yes. Well, that was one of the reasons that we hired Lori, because as an architect, and I think those of you that are architects, well, all of you, we've been doing this for 40 years, so we knew how easy it was in the old days, and they just keep adding layers and layers. So that's why we hire professionals like Lori to handle the stuff that doesn't pertain to our buildings. No, it's.
Just as a little bit of background from myself, I was on the board of directors of a senior center in Los Alamos for a number of years. And paid visits to many of the senior centers, and I think I may have met you at that time. One of the things that I've noticed, certainly with the senior center in Los Alamos, was the singular lack of outdoor space, public gathering space to use outdoors. Even though we had doors, even though we had a front porch, it was not articulated in a way that encouraged people to go outside, particularly where we live with, I mean, where this building is located, some of the most ideal weather in the state of California. And the seniors, we like to be outside, particularly in this area. And I'm not seeing any outdoor access, outdoor covered area for gathering. Something of that nature, which would encourage people who get there to actually go outside and enjoy this beautiful setting. I'm thinking of things like pergola areas, like a summer house that might have interesting area for picnic benches and that sort of thing. I'm thinking of what has become a huge phenomenon in the area recently is fire pits for people to spend some good afternoon or early evening time together outside. The other thing I was looking at in the interior of the great room.
Can we address that outdoor
Absolutely.
area first? Sure. If we can go back, there is a group area. Back a couple of slides that shows there we are. There is this group area that we could, and again, we've got some seating there. Excuse me. We have some outdoor seating areas here. And we have this room B area that we certainly could, do some umbrellas, some seating areas in that for those outdoor leisure times.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Sort of thinking of shaded areas rather than being in direct sun. I think as we lose our hair, we don't want to be outside in the direct sun. And also just around the general center itself, I'm not noticing anything in the area of overhangs that would also create outside, easy access outside seating, which seems to me a pretty easy solution to expand the usage to the outside. And then just moving to the indoors for a second, in the large meeting room, if the expectation is that space will be rented for events, I think you might want to consider doing some sort of a modest stage. I think that would increase the use very significantly for musical elements, stage performances. Seniors like to perform, and I would think that would be a wonderful element to add to this facility without any great expense. It could even be a movable stage.
Exactly.
That's that sort of thing.
Platform.
Yeah, platform. Yeah.
And we've done that in a number of activities, and I've been involved in the Boys and Girls Club organization for a number of years. And that's one of the things that we have done. We actually have portable stage that we could put in the storage area where I mentioned that the seating is up there in that northeast corner of the big room. They could put something portable within that and then roll it out for the events. The problem with the permanent is that if you're not using it, you're losing that space.
Absolutely.
So, yeah,
Absolutely.
I certainly understand the need for that.
I just think that to increase the usability overall of the space, to add, encourage elements that maybe haven't been considered yet, particularly for stage performances and that sort of thing.
Quiet stage performances, and don't want any noise emitted to South Point.
Oh, yes.
I didn't say that out loud, did I?
We understand that about that. Anyway, those are my comments.
Thank
Appreciate the effort here.
So those trees are intended to be a windscreen that you've got It's shown on the plan now.
to soften it, absolutely.
Yeah, because that's gonna be a terrible,
Yeah, that whole valley,
yeah.
I mean, our entire valley collects that anyway, and this thing is compounded because it's funneling down all the way from California.
One other thing I forgot to mention about the elevation of the small building, the barbecue building, is take a look at putting a window above the bathroom side. Maybe you can put some light in the bathrooms or something, but it would also give symmetry to the gables.
Okay.
And moving that door over is gonna, and it's a single use bathroom there,
Right.
so you don't need any screens or anything.
Right.
Is that it, Jim?
Yeah.
Okay. I think you've addressed quite a few of the comments on the list and brought everybody else up to speed. So I would like some clarification from staff. The planner's memo recommends not granting preliminary today. What does that do to them? And Lori, if you want to come up and talk about process, you know, we need to keep the project going.
And it would be lovely to get preliminary so that we're preparing plans. As I hear, there's nothing, nothing significant that we can't readily address in the plan. It would be great to have that ready so we can come back for final and wait for the other portion to catch up.
Do you want me to go first?
Yes, please.
Okay. I think, well, Adam is the planner and he can add to this, of course. I think there are certain elements, plans that are supposed to be included in your review that aren't available to you at the moment. Like things like a lighting plan, the plans for the signage, the landscape and irrigation plan that for restoration and things like slope stability aren't included yet. They have addressed some of the rooftop equipment questions. There's some requirements for the fence design and you haven't seen those elements either. Things like that should be part of the submittal reviewed by the NBAR, but aren't available at this time. You know, if it was, you could request that it come back for preliminary and final together, if that's what the NBAR wants to do. I think the concern is that you just don't have all the materials yet. And also there are some other processes going on that Lori can speak more to with real property and securing the development rights, recordation of the map modification, things like that.
So I believe what our request is, because we appreciate what Shannon and Adam have directed in their memo, is if we could get preliminary approval of the building itself, then Tom and his team can be working on all of the construction docs while we work on many of the elements that Shannon brought up are site related. And we can come back for a different review on all of those site related elements. And we would be, in the meantime, doing the construction plans that include things like odor abatement and some of the other items that are conditions of approval. So we're trying to do this in consecutive review, coordinated review. And, and at the same time, they're doing their fundraising campaign. And this would be a good message to send out to people that we've made a little bit of progress in the county's process to get the preliminary review of the building done and have the design team kicked off. So we know that this is a little bit unusual, but there's a lot of expenses that we're working towards, and this would be one step forward.
Would the planning staff support that?
I don't think we're gonna split stuff out.
I want to clarify. So would you be submitting an alternative case for the site elements?
Yes.
I haven't seen it done, but actually Rice Ranch is not dissimilar in that we reviewed site elements with the grading tract design clearance.
They had grading permits specifically.
Yeah,
I
they
don't
did.
think you
There
can
was-
split this up.
But it's very hard for us to split a project as it's not presented that way today.
Okay,
So I think we can poll the board on support for the building, do continued preliminary review,
okay,
and then you come back for preliminary / final.
I think we're fine with
Does
that.
Technically, does that work
Yeah.
for the staff? Then, so, Tom, do you support the building as it's presented today?
I do.
I
Steve?
also do. Just with the comments that we.
And I do myself too. You have a lot of other site development work that needs to be done, but that needs to come back in the next
Okay,
submittal. So
we appreciate
does that help you keep the project moving? I know there's a lot of people in the community that want to see this go, so. But we do have, if you're finished, Lori, then.
I'm perfect,
Okay.
I'm taking a vote.
So I've got 2 speaker requests that we need to hear from,
Okay.
so,
And Mr. Chair, we do have some people online as well.
okay. Let's go to the people online first.
All right, so we have 2 people online. I'm gonna call on Lisa Akins first, and and then I'll call on our caller, and you just have to hit *6 on your phone to unmute yourself. So Lisa, if you wanted to unmute yourself and provide us with your comments.
Hi, yes. I really don't have any comments. I came on because I have great interest in this center, being an occupational.
Lisa,
Yes.
can you
This
please
is-
give us your full name for the
Oh, I'm
record?
sorry. My name is Lisa Akins. I live in South Point Estates, couple 100 feet from you, from the Oasis Center. And I have a great interest in this moving forward. Being a retired occupational therapist and do a lot of recreational stuff with the elders in the community. I have great interest in this. I have no comments. I really like what I've heard so far. I'm just here to hear what's happening.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so if you're joining us via phone, if you'd like to make a comment, hit *6 on your phone to unmute yourself. And if you don't want to make any comments, that's totally fine.
All right, so we'll move on to the speakers that are present. Mr. McBurney, you'll come to the microphone.
Sure.
Give us your name and for the record, please.
My name is Robert McBurney. I reside at 399 Wilson in South Point Estates. And one concern I have is with the elevation grade between the actual river or stream bed and the actual elevation of the lot. What the grade's going to end up at. I know we have recently had a huge amount of rain. We have on the lower end, a huge amount of sediment. In fact, it's going over the easement road for the Laguna Sanitation access to the sewer heads and washed it out. But I don't know what it's like on the upper end. I just know what it is on the lower end. The actual stream banks that used to be taller than I am now are like this. So, a concern flood-wise is one thing. As far as perimeter fencing, I didn't see anything there. If somebody could address that and tell me what's planned for that, that would be another concern I would have, for separation of properties.
Is that it?
That's it.
All right, thank you.
Quick question for staff. Is there a requirement, Shannon, for fencing between these properties?
There is a mitigation measure related to fencing. Adam might have it available to let you know what it says. I honestly don't recall.
I can pull it up. real quick. Give me a
There is a split rail fence that is proposed along that property line on the north edge, but it was purposely split rail so that it has kind of an older motif, but it also lets any wildlife that is out there in that canyon, in that valley, go back and forth through it to keep it as natural as possible. And again, we're not trying to screen anything at all. So the only fence is that split rail fence. And then, there is a masonry retaining wall, as we mentioned, on that south side against the hill.
So the split rail would be against the walking trail?
The northerly edge.
Walking trail of the.
Correct.
Thank you. So we have one more speaker slip, Mr. Flagg.
Still good morning, everybody. Thank you so much. Just a little bit of an overview. Does everybody know the role that the Oasis Senior Center plays in the community? And right now we're roughly 1,700 members, which I believe we've added almost 150 this year. But for myself, I really didn't know that role until my father-in-law died in 2000. My mother-in-law started attending just to have some outreach with other people and stuff, and the impact that it made in her life. So that was the understanding I had until a year and a half ago when Joe Sheaf and Michelle had got in touch with me and asked me to be involved with the construction project of this. So I hadn't really had a whole lot other to do with Oasis, but I have to tell you, since I became involved, the amount of activities, I mean, if you want to learn how to play the ukulele, there's 45 other people in front of you down there. We've got puzzles, we've got baking, we've got dance, we've got yoga. As a board member now, driving down there, most of the time it's hard to find a place to park during the week because there's so much going on. And just a point of information, 3 weeks ago, we moved out one of the trailers because it became so waterlogged and damaged. We're waiting to bring in a rental and only going with the rental because this will be the new home, hopefully in the next 3 years or so. But I just wanted to speak in favor of the project. I heard mention about flooding earlier. 1960, my mother and I moved up from Los Angeles and lived on Park Avenue. In the 60s, Joey Scolari and I, if you remember Scolari's Market, we used to run up and down that stream bed back in the day. Never did I ever see water standing in that area. I built a home roughly 3/4 mile up Clark Road on the 900 block. Solomon Creek ran through our property. Solomon Creek was roughly, the bottom was about 8 feet below the bank. And the worst winter we ever had, we had 3 foot of water there. And of course, we built the home 3 feet above the 100-year flood mark. So I only add that to say that I've never seen in all the years being a Orchid resident of any water ever standing there. Not like you see now in the farmer fields where you head toward Guadalupe going out Highway 1. You've got a whole other lake out there now. But anyway, just for the difference that Oasis makes in this community, this is going to be such a monumental project of the benefit of bringing to the community. Because right now, if Oasis were to cease to exist tomorrow, it would be missed for the element it does bring to the community. And I thank you, Michelle, for everything you do, and the team that you have, and also the Steve Labard family that made this possible with the presenting of this property. He took care of the utilities for his project, which is now the Erie Castle project. So it's just a really win-win situation for the community.
So Don, could I ask you, since you played down there, don't they dredge the end down by California every few years?
Yeah, they usually move the sediment. It's down there every couple of years, which I think a whole lot of that.
Didn't they do that like every 10 years, every 5 years, something like in the past?
No.
I think it's.
I'm very involved in that process, if I can speak. Over at the flood control district, in fact, Glenn's just retiring at the end of this month. He's been in charge of the flood control supervisor for that basin for years.
Mr. Ingram, could you come up to the microphone so
Sure.
it's clear on the record of what you're discussing?
No problem. In regards to the flood control district there, the control basin, it was taken out by Terry Johnson about 5 years ago, when they rebuilt the Clark Avenue west side on the north side of that intersection at the 101. They took all that sediment and hauled it up there. Right now, as soon as floodwaters recede. We're gonna take it out of there. I say we, the county takes it out, and it's gonna go downstream to where the bridge is on Solomon Road, just before you hit Highway 1. The farmland got washed out. And that bridge has some issues. So that's where that dirt's gonna go. Okay? But we are way, way ahead of where we've ever been in the past. Our grade, we're actually in the flood plain with our tennis courts in South Point. And I would say there's less than 2 feet grade difference between the sediment in the actual stream bed and the tennis court right now.
Okay,
So,
all right, thank you. So,
I didn't put a speaker slip in, but
okay,
I wasn't gonna speak, but it is.
will you state your name for the record
Steve- my
and
name
then
is Steve
fill it out
LeBar.
afterwards, please?
My name is Steve Labarge, and sorry for the interruption. I wasn't going to speak, but I do have some information on the flood control area down there. So basically, this property is 100% out of the flood zone and down more towards California where the retention basin is. That's where all the sediment goes. And typically, the county either sells or gives that dirt away every year to contractors that need the dirt. And I have spent years and years on our property down there below. I planted oak trees down there. I planted a few sycamore trees down there. I've done a lot of work down there. I've built the soil down there. I've gone down there with my tractor, worked the soil up. I planted rye and barley seed down there. I've turned that back into the soil to build the soil up over the years. So I've done a lot of work down there, and I purposely have gone down there every time, walking in the rain and real heavy rainstorms, to look at the creek and see where the water's going. I've never seen a problem with it. So that's just what I want to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So is there anything else the applicant would like to speak to? All right, thank you. So we'll bring it back to the board then. So we've presented a scenario where we support the building, but keep the applicant, so the applicant can keep moving. But we approve preliminary, continued preliminary, and they can come back for preliminary / final, their next submission. So if somebody would like to make the motion for that.
So moved.
And a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
One quick comment on the floodplain. My house is not in the floodplain either, but I had 12 inches of water flowing down the street.
You do.
Okay, so that concludes our agenda. Is there a motion for, what's the word?
Unplugging your computer.
Adjourn.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah, that's
adjournment.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Yeah.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks. Thank you.
It is fun.